în urmă aici, pentru că, așa cum știți, deja urmează Techsylvania, ediția de anul acesta. Și în seara asta nu o să facem mare lucru, o să vizităm orașul, cele mai frumoase zone. Sunt, cred că, a treia oară în Cluj, dar parcă niciodată n-am avut timp să explorez, am fost pe fugă și cred că așa o să fie și de data asta, pentru că evenimentul ține destul de mult pe durata ambelor zile. Însă sper să rămână timp să vă arăt și câteva zone frumoase de aici. M-am gândit să fac așa un mini-vlog, deși cred că o să fie mai mare, pentru că o să am multe să vă arăt de acolo de la eveniment, unde o să fie lucruri foarte, foarte interesante și abia aștept să vă iau cu mine. Cam asta ar fi de zis deocamdată, așteptăm să vedem ce urmează. Parcăm mașina, dar văd că sunt locuri destule de parcat. E foarte frumoasă priveliștea. Foarte bine poziționat locul acesta, un cadru foarte frumos. Și chiar cred că o să se extindă mult zona aceasta, spre deosebire de București, care e foarte aglomerat. Aici e mult mai ok. Văd că lumea a început deja să apară. Deci nu suntem primii. Mersi mult!
So there's sort of three different gates in the hardware development process. One is sort of a non-form factor board. I have examples of what these actually look like coming up, but basically if you imagine you have circuit electronics, this first non-form factor board is sort of a flat, the exposed PCBs. It allows your firmware engineers and your hardware engineers to tap into different electrical signals and really verify the hardware that you're trying to build. This is not form factor, this is not sort of production ready at this point. And then you have some proto builds, which are a little bit more mature hardware, and this is when you start to do sort of the hardware validation testing, this HVT step, which is really the first set of hardware that's coming off of your factory line. So you're getting early hardware. The hardware here is really designed for your developers. It's sort of, you're building dev kits at this point. Next, we get into production. So you have a working prototype, sort of a demonstration of what you're trying to build, and now you're trying to scale it in production. So software, I think deploying production software is, you sort of start the development, you develop the features, you create a beta candidate, and then you deploy that, and then you log the code. This is sort of very high level how you do, and then you have sort of 2 week or however is your cadence for the code commits.
For me personally, he has recruited me to move all across the world to join an amazing Southeast Asian unicorn. I still have a little grudge on him because he asked me and said like, hey, Southeast Asia is awesome, you can drive a fantastic impact there. And 1 year later he jumped ship and became the CTO of MongoDB. So I feel he still owes me a little bit. But I have to say, even in just like a year working together very intensely, that I've learned a lot of things from Mark. So he is one of the people in the technology industry that is full of wisdom. I certainly hope that he'll write a book one day. There's a lot of things to be learned. Last year he has been one of the most appreciated speakers as well.
I'm talking about what you go through every day. So I'm proud to be here. I love Vlad, I love Philip. I actually stole him from Cluj, and that was one thing he didn't mention. We had a big team and we recruited him and his team from Cluj to work in Singapore, but we kept the team here. And I'm proud to say that even though I'm no longer at Grab, the Cluj team is still one of the most highly respected technical teams at Grab. So, hooray for Cluj and hooray for Romania. I'm here to talk about how to grow you. But first I want to start with a tiny, tiny bit of good news. And the good news is that today I am not going to talk about AI. You're not going to hear the word AI except on this slide. That's it. And the reason why is because I'm going to talk about human intelligence. Because if we're actually going to control these bots and get them to do what we want them to do, we all have to focus on getting along with each other. And fundamentally, a career is about two things. It's about your domain skills, it's about what you learn intellectually, and frankly, it's about how you get along with each other. And so, that's what I'm going to focus on today, and I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to start focusing on one person. I'm going to tell a couple anecdotes throughout my career. And this is my career, and you're going to see a lot of it. I started in academia, I moved through some big companies. At the moment, as Philip said, I am CTO of MongoDB and a board advisor, a board member of GitLab and a board advisor. And you remember when you watch YouTube videos and you watch these sessions and you put them on playback speed 1.5x? Well, this is that. You think about your career and you think about what's going on at a company. You think about all the things on the screen right now. You think about all these different topics and they come up during your whole career. Today, I'm going to talk about the ones that are in green on the screen. But if I wanted you to leave with only one thing that I've seen people mess up in their career, is they don't treat their career intentionally. They don't treat every day, every performance review, every job jump as a decision. They let their career manage them. So you're going to hear this at the end as well. My advice to you is manage your career. I'm going to start with a surprising topic. What exactly is my job? I mean, you go to work and you have the JD you were hired for. You have the role you thought you wanted to do when you came to work every day. You have the role your team keeps asking you about doing every day. And most importantly, you have the role that your boss wants you to do. The boss and you are in a power dynamic. As much as we hate to admit it, you feel it, they feel it, it's there. And if you really dig in on this, at any job you've had, and I'd ask you to think about this, the ambiguity between what you think you're doing and what you thought you were going to be doing is different. No matter where you are, no matter what company you are at, you deserve some things from that company. And if you don't get them, you should ask for them, demand them, or leave. The first is you should demand candor. People should speak to each other openly with truths. And when you don't see that, you should complain. Most companies don't do this. There's politics and bullshit. Your leader should give you surprising amounts of context. You should be able to make every decision required for your job. And if instead you're left out of conversations, or left off of emails, or you're just handed some decision, well, that's not a good way to run. How can you grow? You have to be empowered. You shouldn't have to get approvals for a $25 expense report when you control $1 billion fleet. Yes, this was the expense policy at Amazon. I controlled $1 billion fleet, and yet everything had to be approved down to $1. That's not empowering. And safety. This is the thing that's missing in most companies, is the ability to experiment safely, not fail. My joke is, if I was to embrace failure, my board of directors would embrace another CTO. Okay? No. Embrace experimentation. And the best way to do that is to state what the experiment is before you do it. That way, 3 months later, when it goes wildly off the rails, you say, well, yeah, this was outcome 7. Didn't expect it, it happened. Learn to embrace experimentation, especially now. If you do this, and if employees are respected, informed, empowered, and safe, you get engagement and accountability, and employees actually ask for things to do. You want to work at a company like that. So these are the things you should ask for in order to work at that company. So I'm going to go back to where do you fit. You deserve to work at a place you fit. You know, I can't remember the name of the product that the last guy had up here, but your Fitbit will have a different number on it for your stress if you work in a place where you fit. So a lack of fit with culture made me move on. I had a problem that I was at News Corp And New Sport didn't really work for me. It was a kind of aggressive culture, not really best values. You guys may have heard some of the culture, but the mission was amazing. And I really stressed out about it. My wife here in the front row watched me stress out about it for years. Finally, I decided I had to leave, and I went to Amazon, and it was a wonderful choice. But I had to make the choice. Should I leave, or should I stay? How do you think about it? Well, there are arguments for staying. One of the arguments for staying is that you made this big investment. You should go deep on things, not broad on things. You don't want to be the person who jumps companies so often that you only know a little bit about everything, and 10 years from now no one wants to hire you because you're not deep in anything. And then the other thing I'd advise you to do is always look deeply inside yourself when you're thinking about leaving a company. Are you running away from something? Or are you running towards something? Always try to run towards something. If you run away from something, it is likely you will land at a bad spot with bad judgment. It will be a short and unpleasant stint on your career that you will be asked about for a decade. Or worse, never asked about. They just won't call you back. They won't pick your resume out of the bunch. You have to be really careful about running away from something. Make sure you run towards a good position. And when you do leave, and this is advice that I see many people screw up in their career, leave with dignity. There are tens or hundreds of people who got the email that you're on your way out, that you're going to some other company. It was the fancy fun email about what a great idea this was and how the company's going to be great. They are watching you like hawks for that last 2 weeks of your career. They're at that company, and though you don't know it, for the rest of your career, people will be reaching out to them and asking about you. And if they say, yeah, kind of a loser, all you're going to find is that your job offers get to a certain point, you do the interview loop, and they cool, and you don't know why.
There's also disadvantages because you have a duplication of work. It's a wasteful model. At that time, we're still a small company, so you have to be very cautious about your expenses. Technology and knowledge and the duplication of work and product integration is hard because everyone is doing their own. They don't care about the other products that are being developed and the other teams. And the worst thing is it creates silos. Every team on their own. They don't care about the other teams. And culture is something that is really important, at least for Wix, is something that is always being talked about. The first thing is how to create a company with a great culture. So a guild is a group of people that share expertise and knowledge, code, and practice. And on top of those, we build gangs, basically teams, which a gang is a group of people that work on related products, so they have the ownership of their own product. Roles in this model. So a gang has the product lead, the team lead, whoever leads the gang. There are the team members that each of them are spread around the team that have product ownership. And the guild. The guild is a unit. Okay, it's an entity that has a guild lead. That's someone with full-time job. That their responsibility, that was me at the time, to manage the guild. The guild also have guild masters. So if the guild's goal is to spread knowledge, we need the people that spread knowledge. So guild masters, you can think about them as like the senior engineers, the architects, that they go from think about it like a bee. like a honeybee. They go from gang to gang and they spread knowledge and they help them do the right things. Now, they don't just spread knowledge, they also gain knowledge. Okay, if you have a cross-organization, someone that's going cross-organizational, they can actually bring the common issues, the common problems, the common challenges that each gang is trying to solve, thus developing or figuring out, okay, what is the best practice for our entire engineering organization, instead of each and every one tries to solve the problem themselves. Now, the critical part of it, since they gain the knowledge, somebody has to develop solutions.
You can multiply the latency even more on how technology can be applied and can bring extra value in mass mutual. So what we are facing, as I said, 170 years means a lot of processes and procedures. We have been always doing it like that. On the, well, organizatory stuff and processes stuff. So we do have a lot of processes, we do have a lot of procedures across the organization. But more than that, we have a lot of routines, a lot of people that have been doing things like this for a long period of time, and adopting something new is very challenging. And last but not least, we still have old systems, we still have mainframes, and old technology that we are trying to replace and to bring cloud and newer technologies in our setup.
That's also probably forcing us to think, you know what, why is this system at work so clunky? You know, how come my daily experience, since I wake up and look at my, you know, Insta, Facebook or work emails, right? Why does it look so much better than what I'm using at work, right? And this happens also in our organization. We're constantly working on that, but kind of being aware of this, that, you know, what people do in their private lives actually influences how they act in their business lives is probably the best thing to understand at this moment. And the last two things, and maybe as we're in Romania, and I say this with great humbleness because I'm from Serbia, and maybe Southeast Europe is not that, I would say, we're not a very diverse environment. So, you know, when I post things like Black Lives Matter, maybe that's not so relevant for Romania. But I argue that, you know, this is just one of the movements I wanted to talk about. Fairness and social impact becomes probably like within top 3 trends when it comes to employee expectations in terms of, let's say, employees needing to know that their employers are actually making the right ethical decisions about the business. And for example, if somebody told me 15 years ago, when I started, maybe even more now, started working, if somebody told me like, oh yeah, you know, you will expect this from your employer to take a stance on, let's say, a certain event that happened in the world, maybe it's a war or whatever, I would be like, oh, what do I have to do with that as an employee, right? Nowadays, employees are forcing their employers to take a public stance. So you can see on LinkedIn, okay, this company changed into, you know, pride flag during the Pride Month. This company, you can, you know, think about it whatever you want. But
is Silicon Valley approach? How do you see what it means in 2023?
Yeah, well, one of the things, so a lot of, over the years, like a lot of people have asked, like around the world, what's Silicon Valley, what's the approach? One of the things about Silicon Valley is the infrastructure, and what I mean by that is you can pretty much get everyone to work for equity, right? That's pretty unique. So when I was like 23, 24, I started Anchor-Free, and I came to one of the top law firms in Silicon Valley, and I said, I don't have any money, I'd love for you to work for equity. And they said, okay, great, we'd love to. Then I came to PR people, and I'm like, I need PR, but I've got no money, I'd love you to take equity. They said, okay. Then I came to engineers, and they took equity. And so essentially, you have a whole infrastructure where your accountants, your lawyers, your PR people, you can basically will work for some period of time for equity. And that's a great infrastructure because in most parts of the world, outside of Silicon Valley, even if you go a little bit south, even inside California, you go down to Los Angeles, or you go to Chicago, or you go to Texas, and certainly if you come to Europe, most great law firms aren't going to work without cash, right? Most great PR firms aren't going to work without cash, right?
Basically, I'm getting reviews for title and the release date. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, I'm going to do the model. Temperature. As I told you, for the movies we can be as random as we want because we want to see movies that we didn't heard of. But with the reviews, he's going to generate a summary. So I don't want him to fabulate or invent some fictional review stuff. So I want the temperature and randomness as low as possible. Actually, I'm going to go with 0. This is going to generate some randomness, but not a lot. And the message is here. It's going to be the role and the prompt, and that's it. Let me close everything. The maximum tokens in here. You can see here that I am also cheating. I am using a GitHub Copilot here. So, okay. And lastly, I want to check the output. I want to be a JSON. Here you can see the magic happening.
A început ploaia și suntem în căutarea unui loc drăguț unde să mâncăm. Urmează să ne întâlnim cu un prieten, cu un fost coleg de fapt, și să sperăm că nu plouă, astfel încât să putem să vizităm și noi cât mai mult și să vedem orașul mai bine.
Toată negocierea la anul să-mi dea titlul de CTO. Vreau să mai stau 2 ani, tu știi, și foc. Și semnez în contract cu ăia și după de contract la ăleia să-i plătești. Deci la 100, 5% din salarii depinde de...
Am plecat din nou la drum către eveniment și ne-am oprit pe drum să luăm rapid ceva de mâncare, ceva de la patiserie. Panemar se numește și sunt chiar foarte bune. Și aproape am ajuns. Încercăm să mâncăm rapid ce am cumpărat și să ne bucurăm și de această zi plină de conferințe, workshop-uri.
Yeah, I've had a lot of junior people kind of ask me how to get in, especially people that will go to like coding boot camps or something, right? And they're like, okay, I have the basic skills. How do I find a job now, right? Because I haven't worked in a tech company before. And my advice is always to do open source because it's such a great way. Like, you find a project that you're interested in, you know, kind of this is the area or this is the technology that excites me, that I'm interested in, and you can go in an open source project and start contributing and start building up sort of a reputation for exactly what you're interested. Like, is it a database, right? Is it a front end framework? Like, what do you like doing? And you contribute to the open source, and then when you do get a job, right, or when you do, you can meet people sort of in that community that work at companies and try to kind of get into those companies because they know you and they've worked with you, right, and you have this background. And I found that it's a really, really great way of building up a name and a reputation within the industry that you want to be in. And we really wanted to avoid becoming Jira, right? Like, we didn't want to just add features and add features and add features and be like, we'll just solve every problem for everybody that comes to us and make the interface and the workflow really complicated because then you can do anything in it, right? We wanted to say, what would be the nice way of working, and we'll be opinionated about that, and we'll make things as simple as possible. And so, like, it wasn't so much this is where we, think software development's going. We had an idea about how we liked to work and how to make that as easy as possible, and we built that and we kind of forced it on people, right? We were like, people would be like, it doesn't work well for this workflow, and we're like, then don't use that workflow. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And it's not a very common way of sort of building product, but I think it's a very powerful way of building product, of saying, we have a vision of how this is easy. And I think AI is the next wave of this, because for me, at least, I'm still an active software developer. I started, like you said, a new company, and so I'm in the code every day. I'm coding a lot again, where that kind of goes back. If you have a 450-person company, you're generally that nobody lets you touch the source code anymore. But now I'm doing that, and my workflow has changed so much in the last 6 months or so, since OpenAI came out, since Copilot came out, and because I use that instead of Stack Overflow, right, or instead of reading documentation. And for me, right now, I think it's more of a documentation thing of, I want to know how to do something, and instead of reading through a book or reading through documentation, I'll ask, ChatGPT, or I'll write a comment and have Copilot sort of finish it for me and spot check it. But it ends up being much less research and much less typing than it used to be before. But the reason that it's valuable to me is not because the technology is technically interesting, but because it saves me time, right? Like it has a real effect and impact on my personal workflow and on my productivity. And so I can see where that goes, or I think it's relatively clear where that goes, right? That it takes over more and more of your typing, it takes over more and more of your research, and it becomes more about what do I want to accomplish with my code, and less about what are the actual individual lines that I'm writing. Like I just need to know what the logic is and what I want the outcome to be, and I don't really care what the implementation is necessarily, or what language it's in or anything. I care about, does this solve the problem that I want to do, and is it more efficient for the workflow that I have? So this is kind of where I at least see it going, right? Is moving towards more of a low-code sort of solutions of saying, like, the AI systems are really interesting because the language models, what they're good at a lot of things that humans aren't good at, right? And vice versa. Humans are good at things that it's not good at, like some reasoning, right? And sort of logic. But where I see it going is more taking advantage of the things that large language models are very good at, which is not necessarily being correct, but being able to be very productive, right? Like you can say, give me 100 implementations of this, that are all different about this, and test them all and give me the 3 that seem to work the best, and then I can choose that, and then we can go through this iteration over and over again. And I think that's where the future of software programming and open source really is, right? Is contributing to databases of how do I get a large language model to be fitted or to be, fine-tuned to the way where I can just be like, give me 1,000 of them and tell me what you think the best 3 are, right? And then, because human beings can't do that. And I mean, human beings can do that. Like if we got all of the software developers in this room and we gave them all the same problem, we'd get 100 different implementations that all solve the same problem, right? And so you can't, but one person can't do 15 implementations and then figure out which one they like the best at that, right? So that's where I think it's going to go, and I think we'll start seeing tooling and sort of open source solutions that coalesce around that model, right, of what large language models are good at that human beings historically have not been. And I think it's very exciting and interesting and unpaved, right? I think GitHub is going to have to change a lot to take advantage of this, or to help with the Copilot tools or with whatever to help developers move along that route, or somebody else will come and do it better and people will switch over to that as a workflow tool.
Yeah, and I love, right, like the optimistic way how you frame it, right, like that, and that's why they call it like Copilot, right, like the engineer, the developer is still the pilot of the plane, so he's making the decision and he's providing the brain power and intelligence, but now he has this, like what he said, like this almost unlimited amount of helpers that can like give him ideas and solutions, and then he can like pick and choose and see when to ask the right questions, right? Like, so that's the one thing that I really love, that it unlocks a new level of creativity. And whatever I've seen this in my career, right? Like when new tools like mobile development, all this kind of stuff, web services, like some of these big paradigm shifts come available, then people build always like stuff that they just couldn't build before, or they couldn't build at scale, right? Like, so now a 10 people team can build something that maybe before like a 20 or 50 people team could have built. And usually this is like a big unlock of like creativity and new things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been really the history of software development, right? Like it's, you kind of, if you go back to, punch cards or assembly or whatever, like everybody was kind of rebuilding the same tooling over and over, and open source really helps you not reinvent the wheel, right? And to be able to stand on the shoulders or stand on each other's shoulders and say, let's all kind of work on these generic solutions. And that's kind of what GitHub is, right? Like it's open source, it's a lot of libraries, it's a lot of, like if I start, I don't know, a website now as opposed to 20 years ago. I just go through and start taking in all the JavaScript, the node libraries or whatever that I need, and it solves 80% of the problems that I used to have to implement myself. And I think OpenAI is just kind of the next, or LLMs are kind of the next stage of that. These are all sort of problems that everybody solved before, so help me start out there. And libraries are very heavyweight and large, right, as opposed to snippets or individual, functions and things like that, which is kind of the level that the LLMs are working at now. And I think the combination of that just makes it so that, like more and more, it's always kind of the way of software development is there's solutions and solutions and solutions that you can build off of and step on top of and then build something new. And that's really all that I think that we're looking at, right? Like, I don't think anybody's going to lose their jobs. I don't think AI or these tools are going to start putting people out of business. I think it will do what technology has always done, which is allow you to do more with less, right? Like, it's entirely a different proposition to build a website or to build a service or to build a company now than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And 10 years from now, it's going to be fewer people or the same amount of people being able to do much, much more. Yeah, I'm still very lazy, right? And so anytime that there's commands that I'm running and I'm like, this is taking time, this is frustrating, like, I'd rather just be able to work or just be able to focus on this. I actually don't want to use Git, right? Like, I want Git to do everything. I want the tooling, right? Or I want somebody to sit next to me and kind of do all of that, so I can just concentrate on working, on writing code and solving problems, because Git...
Then we go for, let's say, threat intelligence. Luckily, in Cloud Armor or Google have this threat intelligence part, which means you do not have the responsibility to maintain stuff that basically should be by default collection of subset of data. So, for example, as you can see here, Google maintains lots and lots of options. So, for example, this IP list for exit nodes, Tor exit node. How many of you know what Tor network is? Okay, do you guys use it? No? Okay, maybe come to the booth and then I'll show you how to use it. We have a good project there running. So, Tor basically is like a spider web network, which is inconsistent by nature. So the architecture of Tor network is that every single time a bandwidth or any kind of bottleneck happens within different nodes that communicate together, the route will change. So that's the ideology, and it provides complete privacy and anonymity. That was the main goal of having Tor as an open source community-driven network. However, when you provide privacy and anonymity on that level, there are certain people who will try to misuse it. And often, or in today's world, Tor is basically in enterprise and corporate world is a negative word.
Laptop de piață 14. Cel mai ușor laptop de business de 14 inch de pe piață. Și este foarte performant. O spune multe chestii. Iar partea de ampere, pentru că o să fie cât mai compact, s-a pus aici.
They're scared of losing so much because they were taught that it's bad.
When it's just a part of life. It's not bad or good,
it's just life. And so, like, I think about these stories, these narratives, and so I want everyone to think of me, friends, when I die, like, in the obituaries,